good evening, welcome or welcome back once again to Golem Telly. I'm your host, the magical Mr. E. You might be thinking to yourself, what is Golem Telly? Well, there are a couple of ways to answer that question. The first and most simple is Golem Telly is my YouTube channel. I mean, I know that doesn't help very much, but a more detailed explanation for what Golem Telly is might look something like this. Well, Golem Telly has evolved out of Golem Books. Golem Books was the small publishing outfit that I put together a few years ago when I was looking to self-publish the second of my books on computer games from the 1980s. Yes, that's right. I've written 3 books about computer games from the 1980s, and we will talk about those in the fullness of time. So Golem Telly has its origins in computer gaming from the 1980s, but here we are, 4 progs completed already, and we haven't yet looked at anything from the 1980s in terms of computer games. Well, that's about to change. So tonight, I'm going to be leafing lovingly through the pages of the November 1985 issue of Zzap 64. That's issue 7, by the way. It was the first issue that I ever bought. I remember it like it was yesterday, seeing that Oliver Frey artwork for the first time with that incredible Paradroid image on the front cover. Tell you what, let's not waste any more time. Let's get this over to camera 2, stick it under the retroscope, and zoom in. Okay folks, here we go. It's the November 1985 issue of Zzap 64. A seminal moment in the life of the magical Mr. E. I was 12 years old when I bought this issue. It was the first issue I ever bought. Actually, I was 12 3/4. And I didn't actually own a Commodore 64 yet at the time I bought this magazine. I remember I bought it in Watford, by the way. I can even remember the address, pretty much. It would have been, I think it would have been from the newsagent at 340 St Albans Road, Watford. That's not a newsagent anymore. But back in the day, back in November 1985, it was the newsagent that was next door to my dad's shop in Watford. I didn't have my Commodore 64 yet, but I had seen the Commodore 64 in action earlier that year at my friend Darren's house, and I had been blown away by it, and I knew when I first saw it, and he showed me games on it like Summer Games 2, The Way of the Exploding Fist, Ghostbusters. I knew at that point I had to have a Commodore 64. So I set about saving up the money that I needed for it. I think I saved in total something like £180, and I had to work hard at my dad's shop in order to earn that money. But I didn't want to wait until I had the Commodore 64 before I started indulging in some Commodore 64 behaviour. So much so that I started buying up magazines before I even owned the Commodore 64. And one of the first that I bought was this one here. And when I wandered into the newsagent in St Albans Road in Watford in 1985 and I saw this artwork and that unmistakable logo in the top left corner of the magazine, well, I just couldn't leave the magazine there, could I? I had to buy it. It was only 95p. So on the front cover, the standout image, Paradroid, one of these droids blasting out of the screen in proper Oliver Frey style. Love Oliver Frey's artwork. And of course, let's take a moment to remember and pay our respects to both Oliver Frey and Roger Keane, both of whom we've lost in the last couple of years. Way too soon. Right. Let's move this over here and turn the page. So, first page in, and it's a double page ad for Winter Games. My goodness me. Epyx's incredible series of sports titles, beginning with Summer Games, which came out before my Commodore 64 love affair began, really. It was Summer Games 2 that I first saw on the Commodore 64, as I've mentioned already. And it was Winter Games that I think was the first of the games series from Epyx that I bought myself. $14.95 for the disc, $9.95 for the cassette. I didn't know a single Commodore 64 owner back in the day who had a disc drive, a 154 disc drive. We all used cassette players, the C2N data recorder, and that was more than good enough for us. Yes, it meant a bit of waiting around during the loading, but what it did do for us was give us the opportunity to talk to each other and be sociable and chat with our friends while we were waiting for the events to load. Those were good days. They sold 1 million. So we're kicking off with a few ads. That's okay. They sold 1 million, maybe the best compilation of games of all time. It certainly felt like it back then. 4 titles: Daley Thompson's Decathlon, Jet Set Willy, Beachhead, and if you were a Spectrum owner, you got Saberwolf, and if you were a Commodore 64 owner, you got the Staff of Karnov. And they went on to do They Sold 1 Million too, didn't they? I can't remember off the top of my head the titles on that. I think Bruce Lee was on it. They Sold 1 Million 3, I'm pretty sure, had Kung Fu Master and Ghostbusters. Anyway, onto the contents page. So there we see the editor, Roger Keane, assistant editor, Gary Penn, sub-editor, Sean Masterson, software reviewers, Julian Rignall and Gary Liddon. These guys were rock stars to us. I remember visiting one of the PCW shows, the Personal Computer World shows, probably around about 1986, 1987. And I remember the Zzap 64 stand, walking past it and catching a glimpse of Gary Penn. And I was so in awe that I completely lost all my ability to be courteous. And I just called out to him as I passed, "All right, Penn?" And he kind of looked at me like I was a complete idiot. And he was right. I mean, you know, who does that to someone they don't know? "All right, Penn?" Anyway, you know, I was just nervous. That's all. So apologies, Mr. Penn. If I could have my time over, I would come up to you and shake your hand and say thank you for all your wonderful work, and I would be far more gracious than I was back then. But anyway, I was only a kid. The contents page each month would give you a heads up as to the exciting games to look out for this particular month. As you'll possibly have seen already, there's the Activision LCP kit, the little computer people. Of course, being a cassette deck owner, not a disc drive owner, I only ever got to play the very limited cassette version, but I still loved it. So Wizard's Lair was another big game for that month, and Paradroid is Born. Yes, this issue was a bit of a celebration of Paradroid, as I recall. Obviously, there was Paradroid on the cover, with a beautiful Oliver Frey painting. So both the Little Computer People and Paradroid picking up gold medal awards in November 1985. What a great poster. How cool is that artwork for Black Witch? But it wasn't actually a very good game. Available from Smith's, Boots, John Menzies, Woolies, and all good software retail outlets. Thank God Smiths and Boots are still around. Otherwise I might just give up altogether. Editorial section. What I really liked about Zzap 64 is there was loads of copy. There was lots and lots of reading to be done. It wasn't just pictures and flashy colours and so on. And I have to admit, even though I've written some books and I'm an English teacher nowadays, I wasn't the most prolific reader back in the day. Certainly not of novels and the like. I used to spend all my spare time reading issues of Zzap 64. But I think the great thing about that was the magazine was so well written that I benefited from reading it regularly as a result. And I'm sure my vocabulary blossomed thanks to the guys at Zzap 64. I certainly picked up the word superlative from them. And this is when Gary Liddon came on board. A couple of new faces are appearing for the first time in this issue. Sean Masterson joins the team to look after matters strategical. And Gary Liddon used to write for Big K, but we don't hold that against him too much. And he joins the team after a spell at, is it Domark or Dumark? Some people say Dumark. I say Domark. These two will be taking over some of Paul Sumner's review work, as Paul is off to college now and will have less time to get in and see things. I think you know as well as I do that Paul Sumner was not real. More on that later. There it is, that gold medal award. Look at that early picture of Gary Penn. And it was a very clever review. It was written in the form of a diary. And I remember reading how the little computer person didn't fare too well. Here it is. Monday, 16th of September, session 6. Something terrible has happened today. and I don't think I can bring myself to write about it. He wasn't his usual jovial self this morning. He did look a bit peaky, went to bed, slept a lot. Sort of looked rather green, shall we say. I forgot to give him food and water for a few minutes. Well, a couple of hours actually. Look, it wasn't my fault. I was busy. I had other things to think about and it sort of slipped my mind. Okay, I admit it. I killed Adam through neglect. Please, can I have another one? Rest in peace, Adam. A stunning advance in computer entertainment, 97%. Wizard's Lair. Now that picked up a Sizzler on 89%. I think they got a little bit stricter with the Sizzler awards later on. 90% or above only. Wizard's Lair, it was never my kind of game. These games were very popular. It's a bit like a Spectrum game. It looks like a Spectrum game to me, or it felt and looked like a Spectrum game, with lots of single colour sprites. Quite fast moving, as I recall. Gary Penn, there we go. Undoubtedly a game that owes a lot to the likes of Ultimate's Attic Attack and Saberwolf. He's not altogether enthused. I think he feels a bit like I felt about it. Gary Liddon loves it though. Bubble Bus have brought a genre of game to the Commodore that it really missed out on. Definitely one of the best of its type on the Commodore. Not the most helpful screenshots. Now, back then, screenshots would have been produced by holding a camera up towards the TV screen and taking a photograph and then going and getting it developed at the chemist. So the screenshots weren't always particularly detailed or clear, and they certainly weren't always colourful because they were often printed in black and white, but that's okay, we got the idea. I prefer graphics like this to the Wizard's Lair graphics, definitely. To me, this looks much nicer. Nice for your peepers and lugs, but not much of a game. You see what I mean? My vocabulary definitely would have expanded thanks to reading Zzap 64. Not that peepers and lugs are the most important words in the dictionary, but it's good to have them at your disposal, right? I'd like to play Wizardry again. There was something very cool about games from the Edge. They were sort of special. A bit like Ultimate's games. They had that feel to them anyway. That mystique. Now, here's an ad for Crazy Comets. What a game this was. And if you played it on the Commodore 64, then you know it had some of the greatest music of all time, thanks to Rob Hubbard. I think I bought my copy from Watford Market, which is where I bought quite a lot of my games, actually. Brilliant game. Cool ad, even though it's all in black and white. I like that. Cartoon style. Zzap, rap. All the letters. I loved reading the letters pages. Coming soon. Only from Ocean. The Transformers and Knight Rider. It's a nice ad for Paradroid. He's smart. The Ultimate Brain Drain. Well, let's find out. Almost there. Blue Max 2001. Just a bit more of the same, really, right? And Kennedy Approach. World Cup Soccer. Meet Ray Clements and tour the Spurs ground. Oh, cool. Who won the World Cup in 1970? England? Nope. And it wasn't Uruguay, it certainly wasn't Haiti, and it wasn't Colombia. Who won it in 82? Come on, guys, you know this. You were watching episode 4, weren't you? Prog 4 of Golem Telly? That's right, it was Italy. So there's Doughboy. US Gold's worst Atlantic crossing yet. Should have sunk on the way over. 18%. They hated it. That was always the most fun, I think, reading the reviews of the games they absolutely detested. There's Gary Liddon with his finger down his throat. And Julian Rignall can't bear to look. I haven't seen a game as unplayable as this for some time now, and I'm really surprised that US Gold have lowered their standards and released such a bad game as this. I think Gary Penn was usually the most cutting. The graphics are small, rather crude, poorly animated, and got me reminiscing about the good old days with my VIC-20. It makes me wonder why US Gold bothered in the first place. I bet you people would pay a pretty penny for a nice example of Doughboy nowadays. The Castles of Dr. Creep. That was a cool platform game, I think, but didn't fare particularly well with the review team. 65%, a bit dated. More of a glorified platform game than an arcade adventure. Well, yeah, it's kind of what it was, right? But it was good. And William Wobbler. That's a great screenshot, isn't it? Can you tell anything that's going on in that picture? What is this? And yet, according to the team here, the graphics are big and nicely animated. Just not that well coloured. Well, we wouldn't know because you only printed a screenshot in black and white. World Cup Soccer. So, this isn't the game that they absolutely slaughtered. That would have been World Cup Carnival. That was it, World Cup Carnival, which wasn't being reviewed just yet. This was World Cup Soccer and it got a decent score. I mean, we've come a long way. It's no FIFA, is it? Cops and Robbers, 9%. Oh, wow. Okay, so do you know they haven't even printed a screenshot with this one? Graphics, 9%. No animation to speak of, and generally pretty pathetic character graphics, stroke movement. 5.5%. How do they arrive at that conclusion? Well, we can't give it 6% because it's not really worth the full 6, but it's definitely better than 5%. 5.5, everybody? Where's the earplugs? Hookability, not a lot unless you like ZX81 games. Some people do. Blastability, 8%. I doubt it very much. Overall, 9%, the worst program we've seen on the 64. The worst. Cops and Robbers, remember to avoid it like the plague. I don't know what that's all about, it looks boring. I wouldn't have read it back then and I'm not going to read it now. So, Frank Bruno's Boxing, an ad for Frank Bruno's Boxing. That's one of the first games I bought for my Commodore 64. It was tough. 8 fiery opponents. I wonder what Frank Bruno's doing now. He was such a superstar back in the day. A roundup of racing games. Pit Stop 2, the Great American Cross-Country Road Race, isn't it? Yeah. Who Dares Wins 2. Now, Who Dares Wins 1 was the same game. Wasn't there some sort of copyright issue? And they had to rebrand the game as Who Dares Wins 2 after just making a few cosmetic changes. And there was another of my first games, Rambo First Blood Part 2. I loved that game so much that I actually programmed on one of the BBC Micros at school the loading screen and the music. But yeah, what a brilliant game. I mean, it wasn't a classic in terms of its gameplay, but the whole package, the music, being a Stallone fan, I loved it. Must play it again soon. Could be a future episode of Golem Telly. Could be. Issue 1 of Amtix, Tell Your Friends, October the 17th. I think I made the right choice with my Commodore 64. But I was always kind of curious about the Amstrad. I liked the way the graphics looked. I thought they were somehow a bit prettier than the Commodores. Commodore had this kind of strange, muddy look sometimes. But the Amstrad graphics, when done properly, looked really colourful and gorgeous. Adrian Mole Goes Video, The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole and the Growing Pains of Adrian Mole, the incredibly popular humorous books about the life of Adrian Mole, poet, intellectual and secret diarist, have now been transferred to computer by Level 9. Everybody has a copy of The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole. Black Witch at last. We've already seen the ad. Ultimate's latest game has got here at last. The only trouble is that it arrived a few days after our review deadlines and therefore we couldn't review it. Never fear though, it'll be reviewed fully next issue. keeping us in suspense. But if I remember correctly, they didn't think very much of it. Reasonable but dated shoot 'em up. Yeah, I think the music, I can't remember how it went, but I seem to remember enjoying the music, and they liked it too. Very good military tune, but gets monotonous. Well, the whole game got monotonous. It was only $1.99. I mean, what do they want? A couple of quid, well spent. Hunter Patrol, I'd buy it again. Robin of the Wood. Interesting that they placed that Robin of the Wood ad right next to their review of Saberwolf, which they didn't think very much of. Look at that. Having seen and played Saberwolf on the Spectrum some considerable time ago, I wondered whether it was worth Firebird's time releasing it. There are plenty of new style aardvarks. They love calling these games aardvarks, don't they? And the format of the game is rather crusty. God, they were harsh, weren't they? 1 year. 1 year is all it takes for a game to go from being state-of-the-art to rather crusty. Saucer Attack. Oh, this was another terrible one, wasn't it? This game suffers from the fab graphics shame about the game syndrome, says Julian Rignall. The first ever Zzap quiz. It's a crossword. Okay, let's see if we can get one. 9. The original 3D racing game. Pole position? Let's see. Poleposition. Pole position. I'll have a go at that later. Don't worry, I'm not going to use a pen. Joystick review. I don't think I had any of these. I mean, there's the classic. I must have had one of these. Do you know what I had, actually? I had a remote control version of one of these. Or 2 of them. It was a big chunky thing, so it was chunkier at the bottom, so it could include the transmitter or whatever it was, and it had a big sort of rubbery aerial sticking out of there. But otherwise, it was the same controller. Where's the QuickShot 2 Turbo when you need it? The boss. That doesn't look very good. I reckon that would break easily. A rather average stick at an above average price. I remember the QuickShot 9. This sort of, it looked like a trackball, but it wasn't really, and I think you got it free with a subscription to Zzap. More joysticks to consider. This is what we loved. Oliver Frey's incredible artwork. These center spreads. The White Wizard's Nightmare. And I mentioned my 3 8-bit computer gaming books at the start of the program. I've written 3 books about computer games in the 1980s. The third one of those, Arcade Imperfect, I'm very proud to say, has an original piece of Oliver Frey artwork for its cover. And I have a feeling it might be the last piece of artwork that poor old Ollie ever produced. I'm very, very humbled and proud and honoured that my third book has that cover. Beautiful job he did as well, as always. Rest in peace, Ollie. Okay, on we go. It's in good condition, this issue, isn't it? Look, nothing cut out. What's this? So, 11 great 64 games to go with Britain's best 64 games mag. Okay, pick any 2 titles when you subscribe. Okay. How much was a subscription? Zzap sub plus 2 disc games, $24.45. It's pretty damn good, isn't it? Here we go with the tips. Okay, lots and lots of tips. Finders keepers, a couple more clues. The model Cutty Sark and the empty bottle make a ship in a bottle, and the lump of cheese and the mouse quite logically make a very fat mouse. Get the knife and fork from the astrologer's study and the leg of chicken from the Garden Gate maze to make a chicken bone. You can now get the large hairy dog from Gordon the trader's room and take it to the cat. Drop the dog in front of the cat and it will disappear, allowing you to escape from the castle for good. It's a great game, Finders Keepers. There's an unusual ad for Doctor Who and the Mines of Terror. Remember that game came in a great big chunky video box. Okay, a Nodes of Yesod map. More tips. Double page ad for Monty on the Run. Gremlin graphics pushing the boat out. Full colour as well. Brilliant game. And everybody agrees that it had the best Rob Hubbard music ever. On the Commodore though, not on the Spectrum or the Amstrad. Tough luck, guys. Ah, the adventure section. I want to believe I was really into my adventures, but I wasn't really. I like playing Twin Kingdom Valley on the BBC Micro, and one or two others, but text adventures weren't really for me. Terra Molinos, that was a brilliant text adventure. Getting towards the end of the magazine now, we're still waiting for some big reviews to appear though. Basildon Bond. Do you remember Russ Abbott, guys? Do you remember the Russ Abbott Show? Was it called the Russ Abbott Show? Or was it Russ Abbott's Madhouse? Watch out, it's Dynamite Dan. 94% Crash Smash. Did I ever play Dynamite Dan? I think I played Dynamite Dan 2. I can't remember. Thanks for sending in all the forms and telling us just how much of a wally you are. So, you might think that starting your ad with "and on the 8th day, Epix created Summer Games 2" might be over-egging it a bit, but no, Summer Games 2 really was that good. Oh, there's Summer Games also available in October, because they re-released it, that's right. Yeah, Epix re-released it, didn't they, with the same style packaging, but previously it had been released by Quicksilver in a big Quicksilver blue box. All you OCD types wouldn't have enjoyed that lack of uniformity on the shelves, that's for sure. Would have been celebrating the news that Summer Games was going to be re-released in this classic sort of, how would you describe that artwork? Neon style. Anyway. What a gentlemanly game. Steve Davis. Wasn't 1985 the year that he lost that final to Dennis Taylor? It was, wasn't it? And something like 30 million people were still up at midnight watching it on TV. Huh. That stuff doesn't happen anymore. Okay, what's this? Another quiz? Do we know any of these? Isn't that Super Pipeline 2? There's Way of the Exploding Fist. Skyfox. And Pac-Man. There we are, I've still got it. The Rats. A new experience in software terror. What did Sean Masterson have to say? He had quite a lot to say, didn't he? The narrative quality of the text is superlative and gory. Told you, superlative. I learned that word from Zzap 64. In true Herbert style. Definitely not for the squeamish. Overall 79%, an exciting blend of arcade strategy adventure that would benefit from some tidying up. Steve Davis snooker there. Generally appreciated by the team. Superlative snooker simulation. Told you, that's 2 superlatives in 2 pages. Axis Assassin. Best version of Tempest on the Commodore 64 yet. Karateka, or Karateka, I'm not sure. An excellent variant on a Kung Fu theme, but it's a shame it's so slow. It's a good looking game. They could have tried a bit harder with the screenshots, look. I don't know what they're aiming for there. Just a couple of screenshots taken 1 second apart. Haven't we already had an ad for Kennedy Approach in this issue? I'm sure we have. That's weird. And here it is, Winter Games. I mean, look at that. 1985, when you looked at these full colour screenshots, you would have just been amazed. A well-deserved sizzler for Winter Games. I mean, I don't know why they didn't give it a gold medal. It was every bit as good as Summer Games 2, wasn't it? I loved this game. 94%, another classic sports simulation from Epix. Gary Penn looking very pleased with his thumb aloft, but what does he say here? I was initially disappointed, nay, disgusted by the fact that this game was very similar in appearance to its predecessors. And Epyx should have made some effort to change this. The same can be said of the 7 new events. He doesn't sound very happy. World Cup 2. International Soccer, still the definitive game. It doesn't look great, does it? There's Frankie Goes to Hollywood. What a brilliant game. Had that been reviewed already? I can't remember if it was already out. I bought my copy of Frankie Goes to Hollywood in Windsor. Amazing game. Your chance to jump in and win one of the 50 copies of Nodes of Yesod up for grabs. Getting very close to the end now. Well, these pics are quite nice to see, aren't they? There's Julian Rignall. And there's Gary Penn. With his new haircut by that point. I bet he was on to Ollie Frey saying, come on, update my picture. I don't like my old hairstyle. This is the new me. Top 30 games for November 1985. Summer Games 2 right at the top. Elite. Look at these games. Wow, what a machine we had. We were so lucky. Way of the Exploding Fist, Drop Zone, Pit Stop 2, Beachhead 2, Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Fourth Protocol, that was good, wasn't it? Thing on a Spring. Oh, those days were great. Games are rubbish nowadays. There, I said it. Okay, getting close to the end. Oh, but blimey, isn't it interesting that the review, the gold medal review for Paradroid, doesn't actually appear in the magazine until page 120. A review of one of the best games ever released for the Commodore 64. I was never very good at it. I was better at Uridium, which was the follow-up. I loved Uridium. It was hard going though. Okay, they were always going to give it a gold medal, weren't they? I mean, they'd spent, I think, if memory serves, several months running features on the production of the game. So after all that, they were hardly going to give it 89% and have it just missing out on a sizzler or something. I'm not suggesting that it wasn't worth the gold medal award, just that I preferred Uridium personally. Oh, and Alley Cat, which I know wasn't anywhere near as well received as the first two, Paradroid and Uridium, but I loved Alley Cat. What did Julian Rignall say? One of the best programs I've seen on the 64, and one that has been keeping my interest for several weeks. Something that a game hasn't done for some time. And there's the final scores for Paradroid. 97%. The classic shoot 'em up. The classic shoot 'em up. That's all you need. There's International Karate. Very odd artwork. I never really liked that artwork, but the game itself looked fantastic. £6.50. That's an odd price for a game. And it had a white cassette box. I remember very clearly. And I bought it at Watford Market. The Terminal Man. I loved this artwork. So when they became available to buy on the oliverfreyart.com website, which I think is now shut down, I missed out on page 1 and I missed out on the last page, but I managed to get 3 consecutive pages that I really, really loved. The original artwork for the Terminal Man, and I've got them framed upstairs without the speech bubbles. They look gorgeous. I will bring those down one day and show them off to you. I'm very proud of those. Okay, I think we're at the end now. More action next month. A cool ad for Fight Night. That's a brilliant game. I don't know if it was the best boxing game. Frank Bruno's boxing I loved. Barry McGuigan's World Championship Boxing, if that was its full title, that was excellent, and I had a lot of fun playing that game. But Fight Night was also really good fun, more cartoon style, pretty obviously, but it was a good game. Loved it. And I think, yes, Scooby-Doo in the Castle Mystery on the back cover. Now, rather notoriously, the final game didn't look anything like that. These screenshots all look amazing, don't they? It looks like it's going to be like an actual cartoon on your Commodore 64. But The final game when it came out did not look anything like that. It was a side-on platform style arcade adventure, and it wasn't great. Anyway folks, that's it. That was the November 1985 issue of Zzap 64, and the first issue of Zzap that I ever owned. And it was a real treat leafing through it again one more time. It won't be the last time, don't worry. Okay, let's go back to camera one and wrap up. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. That was my first ever issue of Zzap 64. November 1985. What was your first issue? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really, really appreciate it. If you could like and share the video, I'd be so grateful. If you could subscribe, if you haven't done so yet, that would be amazing. And hit the notifications bell so that you don't miss my next show, which maybe 3 days from now, 4 days from now. I'm aiming for 2 a week, remember? Okay, enjoy the rest of your evening, take care, and I'll see you very soon.
Evening shadows deep.